So we are located here in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And we are able to measure dust storms coming from Mongolia all the way over to the Rocky Mountains. And yet the pollution that we're creating here in the United States is being measured in Europe. So we really are like a giant fishbowl. Recent literature has actually shown that not only were we measuring a dust storm once in Africa to the United States, but it actually was seen the second time around.
I'm Gannett Haller, and I'm an atmospheric scientist, and I'm at the Desert Research Institute.
Since its inception in 2009, the ASCENT program has held annual workshops in Steamboat Springs, Colorado at Storm Peak Laboratory. Storm Peak Laboratory is an atmospheric research facility located over 10,000 feet on top of Mount Warner. Atmospheric science, collaboration, and enriching network conferences have brought together junior and senior scientists from across the globe. ASCENT has demonstrated a wide scientific collaboration and networking amongst its participants, allowing for new science to be founded. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all to ASCENT 2011, and I'm so extremely happy that you're here, and so very happy that you, of all people who I know are outrageously busy with the summer and proposals and papers and field campaigns, took time to come here. This is our third year of ASCENT, and I would say that it has been a success. Co-investigator on this project is Linnea Avalon. Linnea and I started talking about doing something like this maybe a decade ago.
I'm Linnea Avalon. I'm an atmospheric chemist. We got the idea for ASCENT based on a lot of discussions that we had had over the years. There were not really good mentoring opportunities for women coming up in the field. There was a need for this type of forum for women to come together as a group, to learn about the difficulties that each other were having, and to develop strategies for going forward in their careers successfully.
The other co-investigator, Laura, who's right here. Laura also works at the Desert Research Institute and has been involved from the get-go in creating ASCENT.
My name is Laura Edwards. I'm an assistant research climatologist at Desert Research Institute. I am one of the co-investigators with Gannett Haller and Linnea Avalon. The three of us kind of could see this idea and proposed it, and we're fortunate enough to get funded to support ASCENT. Gannett and I had been talking actually about outreach and education. There aren't very many early career women at our institute. There are a few, and it's growing, but we were talking about women in science in general, and she knew Linnea, who's the other co-investigator on this project.
I felt very, very fortunate to have Linnea as my advisor as a woman in science, and that I also feel a responsibility to pay that forward.
You know, as Gannett moved into a postdoc and then into her first independent position, we spent a lot of time talking about how did we get to where we are and what were some of the obstacles. And I think we realized that there wasn't a good mechanism out there for women in particular in our field to find mentors and to get advice about the difficult things that come up as you go through your career. I think it's really important that women have an opportunity to meet other women in the field and to develop networks, personal networks, professional networks. It's something that's very hard for us to find in general. Most atmospheric science departments are pretty small, don't always have a lot of women, and I think it makes it a much richer environment to have colleagues that you can work with.
We have a 3-year grant, so it's already built in. We'll have a workshop each year for 3 years in the summer about this same time of year here in Steamboat Springs, and the reunion events 1 or 2 per year. And each year we'll have a whole new crop of people. So we'll have 20 new junior scientists and hopefully 10 new senior scientists each year, for a total of reach out to 60 junior scientists and 30 senior scientists by the time this project has ended. Heather Theory has done a fantastic job of getting the assessment and effectiveness of the program off the ground.
My research interests are around women and minorities in science, and basically why aren't there more women and minorities in science, and what are effective strategies to help recruit, retain, and advance more women and minorities in science.
She'll be following these people longitudinally throughout the 3-year program to see how the mentoring works out, how they felt the workshop may have affected their decisions or choices. So there will be a whole complete assessment and evaluation of how effective we are, and hopefully we can make an impact in the field of atmospheric science.
One of the unique things about this program is that it's very discipline specific. So we're open to women in atmospheric science. So it ends up that not only do we have a lot of similar experiences, but we also have a lot of similar research interests. So you end up finding people that you can write proposals with, do work together, start projects with. We all end up sharing samples. We end up taking samples at different locations, and I think it enhances all of our science.
I applied to ASCENT because I looked at the webpage and it just looked like such a great experience and like nothing else that I had ever done before.
I think one of the advantages of the ASCENT program is what I call vertical networking. So lateral networking is what I call when you meet your peers. And it's really easy to meet peers who are working in similar fields and develop collaborations amongst your own cohort. But for me, one of the things that I find is difficult is doing that the vertical networking, where you're establishing relationships with senior scientists who are a few levels above you. And that's something that's always been challenging for me. And I think that one of the nice things about ASCENT is that they've brought together this group of junior and senior scientists. So you're working on both in the lateral direction and in the vertical direction.
Part of ASCENT is definitely having open and honest conversations. That's really what we want to do. We don't want to beat around the bush about stuff. We want to be open and honest about challenges that we may be facing in our career and challenges that we may be facing due to sexism, potentially.
When women are alone, they tend to communicate a little bit differently. They relax more. I think there's some automatic programming when men's around. There's a little more tension. So in those regards, it's different. Although, you know, when it's a technical discussion, I'm always amazed at women's ability to kind of shift instantly to that and be very serious, you know, and very professional. So in that regard, I think it's different. You know, there's some topics being discussed that you wouldn't hear talked about it in an AGU conference, and women have issues that are unique that men don't.
I was really excited to hear that the older female scientists were willing to share like really personal stories with us, and I think it just kind of created a special bond within the group.
We have both senior scientists who are going to give talks, and they're going to focus both on their career and how they got to be who we aspire to be. And then they're also going to talk about maybe challenges they've faced along the way, both personal and professional.
I attended the ASCENT workshop in July of 2010. It was fabulous. It was such a wonderful experience to have so many young women in the room and to actually be witnessing the shift that's already happened in the culture so that we're working to support our young women today in a way that I was not supported, and I would have given anything to have had that support.
I think the thing that I liked about ASCENT the most was the interaction between senior faculty and junior faculty. And one of the things that I particularly appreciated with the senior faculty was how they brought in personal aspects of their lives into their presentations and our discussions. And that was really eye-opening, I think, because sometimes when you're younger and you're starting off your career, it's easy to think of just the immediate future and how are things going to be before tenure. And it helped me gain a view of life after tenure and how to maintain a career trajectory that I wanted to keep, and how to think about strategic planning for my career in the long run.
It's been great. The senior scientists have been really nice, sharing their own personal experiences and being understanding of what we're going through as a younger generation, because things have changed quite a bit in the last few years.
And so to know kind of who to go to, what you can do to get around some of these obstacles that will crop up in people's career paths. And also to learn, to get to know other colleagues in their area, because you don't make it any longer as a lone scientist. So if you can find people to work with, to talk to share papers with, you're going to have people write letters of recommendation for you to go up for tenure. So you need to have a cohort people that you know and respect you. And these types of small meetings are just invaluable in establishing those relationships.
I really appreciated all of the stories that the senior scientists told, and the fact that they said they all told about their challenges. They all told about, I had a child who got sick at this point. I had a period of a year where I was not productive. I had to go and move away from my family for a year here. I mean, those are things you never hear. I mean, we see these CVs, and and all you see is, wow, this woman has 100 publications. She's not me. I have, the time when I'm sick. I have the year where I'm not productive. I must not be that person. And to hear that they've all been through some period and recovered from it, I find so impressive. That actually it's, knowing about the hurdles means more to me than knowing about, the combination of the hurdles and the successes, I think, has been the most inspiring.
I feel like there's been great connections that have been going on here. This is one of the hardest things for me. I feel like I'm fairly outgoing, but I have reservations about my research sometimes. Am I doing the best research? And we all have this perfectionist type attitude, and is it good enough to tell them about, and that type of thing. And so this has been great to really just open up about research and get to know people in more of a smaller area. And so instead of 2 minutes at a large conference, you meet people for 20 minutes one day, and then you kind of think about what you talked about, and then you can talk about it again later in the afternoon and the next day. And so it's really been a great experience, collaboration-wise.
Research isn't done alone these days. Enriching your network is what this is about. Forging new relationships and expanding perhaps your existing network. Not just making life choices, discussions about making life choices or mentoring or about the career pipeline, but sharing real research.
There's really a strong emphasis on collaboration now, and I'm currently in a department that no one else really does what I do. And so outside collaborations are really, really important for me. So I'm really hoping that there will be some overlap with some people who do experiments and observations that I can do models and theory for. I'm really hoping that that'll amount to something.
I originally got in touch with Gannett when she was doing mercury measurements up at the Storm Peak Laboratory, and I said, do you have anybody doing anything in the liquid phase? And she said no, and I said, well, I've got an analyzer that I could use. So she sent me some snow samples, and I've analyzed them. It's very close to my detection limit, so I can say, well, I think the number's about 4, but that's plus or minus 3, so but at least it gave her a little bit of feedback to understand what the precipitation was like and the mercury at that site.
I think it was the perfect amount of science, actually. One of the best benefits was just to meet other people that are doing similar work, that we could start maybe future collaborations or just know what else is going on in the field. Because atmospheric sciences is so broad, you can work from here all the way up to the stratosphere.
Linnea Avalon lent me a small personal ozone analyzer, which is just like this little thing like this, and because I'm trying to characterize what the air quality is over Lake Michigan. And so I went sailing with it, which is awesome because you can go sailing and then you don't have nitrogen oxide emissions, and so you have pretty much like a pure sample of your ozone. You're not increasing emissions of other things when you go out sailing.
There's a young woman who's running regional climate models for California, which is where I have a whole bunch of surface data, and actually she's running a mesoscale meteorology model. And I've been running a simple model that doesn't work, and there's no way I'm going to learn how to run a mesoscale model because those are really, really, really hard. But she's running it over the domain where I have all my data, so I'm thrilled. So she's going to share her model output, and I'll compare it with my data.
Gretchen is at the University of North Dakota, and she was like, oh, I've got this undergraduate research experience I have to do, and nobody signed up for it, and they've got to apply today. And I was like, I've got undergraduates. Send me the information. So 2 of my undergraduates actually went there and for the summer, and they loved it. They were like, oh my gosh, Dr. Cleary, there's so much cool equipment at a real place. And I was like, yeah, isn't it nice to see expensive equipment? But and actually, it turns out one of those students, I think, is applying to graduate school to go there, and she really felt mentored by Gretchen and is still looking towards, so that was a good funneling of my students to her potential student base.
And so collaboration, I think, is very key, and from the group of people at this ASCENT workshop, I'm hoping for future ones.
Oh, everyone's clicking. Yeah, and they're participating to their fullest. I mean, really, they're doing exactly what we expected, what we hoped they would do. Right. What they came here to do. Not just talk about, ideological things like how to mentor or how to get tenure and this kind of thing, but actually networking, getting professional colleagues
to work with.
Right. A lot of people are talking science, which is a good thing. A lot of people are talking about potential science, writing papers, getting proposals done.
Oh yeah, like even in the car ride down here, it's you'd think we'd be talking about all kinds of stuff, you're just in a car ride. But yeah, they're all talking science in our car.
We wrote that in the proposal actually as integral to the workshop experience, making professional connections and also social connections. And for example, the visit to the lab today with a social experience tied in with a science experience, because you spend the time getting there and getting back, and you learn about science experimentation while you're there. And we had learned through previous experiences or learned through other projects in this National Science Foundation program that tying in social activities is very successful to the participants' experience on site.
Literature shows that the more colleagues you have, the more likely you are to publish more papers. And in academia, success is measured in the number of publications that you have. And so for many women, they may be the only woman in their department. And having an opportunity to meet other atmospheric scientists who in other places that they could collaborate with, we hope makes them better candidates for promotion.
I think that being successful in science, doing good science is critical, but then being excellent is having the right contacts and having the right colleagues and earning respect from everyone. And to earn their respect, they kind of have to know about you.
I think the best thing that I've got out of the conference has been able to meet I'm a postdoc at the moment, and being able to meet a lot of assistant professors and meeting a lot of my peer group. Coming from Australia, I didn't really know many young female atmospheric scientists. So just being able to build that network has been fantastic. I think also just seeing some of the different ways that people have gone about getting tenure or going through the tenure track process has been really interesting. We don't have that system in Australia, so this has been a bit of a crash course on how that all works.
I think that everybody here is really on board with working with other people, not even if it's just other females, but it's with other people, and they're really interested in doing collaborative work and being supportive of each other. And I don't get that feeling of like, oh, you got those results and I got this, and I'm not getting that attitude at all, which is very common when you go to a national meeting where like, well, my results show this and yours say that. And here I see, oh, you know what? I got this in my model, and this might have been different for yours, but let's talk about it and work it out. Or, hey, I've got this great idea, let's work on this, let's do that. So I just feel like everybody here has this energy to just get on board and work together and do something for the collective good of each other and for the science that we're doing. And that energy is just very, is great to be immersed in.
It's completely different than AGU and 16,000 people running around. There is a lot in this intimacy of a closed group, because more or less we were always participating in the same talks or same sessions.
I've told other people this too, both with ASCENT and from the Earth Science Women's Network. I've, over the years, gained a lot of resources where, I didn't need them at the time, but when it came that I was ready to interview and ready to negotiate a job offer and make these decisions, I had in the back of my mind, oh, I remember that conversation at Earth Science Women's Network, or I remember, so-and-so talking about this at ASCENT, and I was able to draw upon those experiences well after the fact, talk with people and help make my decision.
I think one thing that is extremely important for ASCENT participants is to learn the statistics. So when I started talking about ASCENT and when Laura and Linnea and I started putting it together, I often heard from my male colleagues, there's a lot of women. There's a lot of women. And so it was so important to learn your statistics, especially for your field.
ASCENT is a great stepping stone for a lot of people to be able to find new jobs, find new experiences. Atmospheric scientists women are still underrepresented in atmospheric science. And currently, we're at about 15% of tenured faculty. And so for that to change, people have to network so they can find new jobs.
We can tell personal anecdotes, we can tell stories about other people that we know, and those can be powerful in getting someone's attention. But I think again and again, it's been demonstrated that to actually get something to change, you have to show people who you want to change the data. You have to back it up with something. So when we wrote the proposal for ASCENT, we looked at the percentage of women faculty in the top 10 atmospheric science departments in the country. And the best of those had about 10% female faculty. The worst had none. When we wrote the ASCENT proposal, we did a little bit of research, of course, to figure out what was known about women's progress in the field. And Gannett shared with you a statistic last night. So about the time we wrote the proposal, the Chronicle of Higher Education had come out with a listing of the top 10 departments in a variety of fields. And we took that list of the top 10 departments in atmospheric sciences and went to their web pages and looked at their faculty listing, and were absolutely shocked to find that the largest fraction of women tenure-track faculty in those departments was 10%. The largest. All right? There were at least 2 departments that had no female faculty, and they were top 10 departments. Those numbers are very powerful. And yes, male colleagues might come along and say, yeah, but there are a lot of female graduate students, so there really isn't a problem. Well, there is a problem because that population is not represented in the junior professors and the senior professors in the administration.
I look around and all I see are white men in my department. And I'm like, so can an Asian woman survive this experience? Can I do anything that I want, really? So it was great coming out here and meeting other successful women and see how this could hopefully breed a new generation of new female scientists.
A big part of ASCENT is creating awareness. And part of the way that we create awareness is through statistics and data. And when you have the data, you start to realize that there's not that many women in our field at positions of leadership.
This is more recent. Women faculty did cite isolation as the most major reason for their departure. So either isolation of field campaigns or isolation in their department.
It's been long recognized that there's not many women in our field and not many opportunities for women in our field.
There's one other female postdoc in my department, but she doesn't want to continue on in academia at all. So it's been nice to talk to people that are a bit further up the chain and get some advice.
I'm currently in a department that no one else really does what I do.
Talked to some of the older senior scientists, and they were the only one, and that's not my experience. I'm the only atmospheric scientist in my department, but there are other females around, so that's a little bit easier.
Most of the time when I'm in a meeting or I walk into a room, I am the only female person, but yet I feel welcome. I feel like they respect me. I feel like they want me included, and so I've felt very little. I have very little problem with being the only female.
When I joined as a postdoc, I was the only woman in the water quality modeling group, but I did not feel it at all. I had a very supportive people around all my life.
There are not enough women in science. I mean, even in my department, all the women are retiring. One of my mentors retired on Friday, and they're all disappearing, and everyone they're hiring is all men.
I'm not sure how many women are at Los Alamos. The lab's about 11,000 people, so it's huge. But I can tell you within my small little research group, I'm the only one, but there's only like 5 or 6 of us. Within our larger group, actually our group leader is a female. So there are strong females there, but definitely not in the majority by any means.
Science, in many ways, is a lonely endeavor. So you have to sit down by yourself at your computer and write your papers, analyze your data. But most people aren't, they aren't just solitary people. They do want to interact. And so it can be frustrating if you're isolated and you don't have colleagues to talk to. And so it really is important to develop the relationships. And it might be a relationship at your own institution where you get together for coffee once a week to talk. Or it might be someone you call up on the phone or email once a day with your today's findings. Oh, we found this, we analyzed the data, look at this cool finding we found. But you need to have people to share your science with.
We're hoping that through ASCENT, you're not isolated anymore, that you've met people that you can talk to about science as well as about what you're going through. How to get tenure, how to write up a package, how to write a good paper, how to deal with nasty reviews, how to deal with great reviews. So all those things. We have been running Storm Peak Lab together for 5.5 years. Running Storm Peak Lab together is a lot like running a small business. There's a lot of couples or families that run a small business, and so the nice thing is that you understand your partner's strengths and weaknesses really well. And so we know each other well enough that we can fill in holes and fix problems before they happen. A typical day at Storm Peak Lab is different every single day. We're rarely at Storm Peak Lab by ourselves, Ian and I. There's almost always people around. Graduate students, other scientists, postdocs, etc.
I think Storm Peak Laboratory set up a good example for multifunctional, not only to understand the administrative process, but also serve as a good educational platform so that we can host different scientists from different countries. We can host young scientists to have some practical experience that how the field work look like and how we can work together to improve the environment.
Storm Peak Lab is a very unique place and has a lot of instrumentation, but you can also use data that's already been collected there, or it's an opportunity to house instruments or live on site on a mountaintop. Very unique site at over 10,500 feet. There aren't very many laboratories like that in the world.
The hike was quite good. At the beginning, it was pretty rocky and steep, but it's really great opportunity for me to talk to several different young scientists.
The lab was great. All the different equipment they have, and Gannett was doing a great job of just showing us all the different type of research that goes on there. I hadn't got a full appreciation for that until I actually came up here.
So Storm Peak Lab is education and research facility. So we mainly do atmospheric aerosols, clouds, and trace gases. That's really what we specialize in. People have field campaigns here. Myself, I have had several field campaigns here, which are funded by NSF. This year was by far our largest field campaign. By far, we had about 60 investigators involved in a campaign called StormVex, which was funded by the Department of Energy, which is a Storm Peak Lab cloud validation experiment.
I really liked the lab. I don't do observations, so I love seeing how hard it is for them to try and capture these things that I throw into a model, and voila, I have tons of data everywhere, everything I could ever need, and they're out there trying to get, a couple little bits of data every few hours or whatever, and I thought it was great to see that people are working on it. I'd love to take a group of students up there.
I worked with Gannett and Ian and a number of other scientists that rotated through. The student volunteers, like myself, also rotated through, and our primary role in the project was to keep the sensors operating. So when the lab was in cloud, we wanted to be measuring the cloud, and there were a number of different probes that were used to measure the cloud. But because it was very cold, ice would freeze onto the probes, and that impairs the measurements. So I would go up, depending on how cold it was and how much liquid was in the clouds, I would be up and down the ladders at the lab every 15 minutes to 30 minutes with a hairdryer, believe it or not, and we would blow dry the instruments to get the ice out so that they could measure.
I saw it when I was about 10 years old. I was in ski school and saw little 10, 12-year-olds, and they were just like, that's where the scientists work. And I was just like, wow, that is so cool. I always remember that and actually kind of want to go back through photo albums and find the pictures from then.
The Storm Peak Laboratory, it was awesome to see that people actually have the equipment and it's set up and it's running and they're making measurements and they believe in it. I can see the passion that they have for their measurements and what they're trying to measure, what they're trying to achieve, and the results that they're getting are just phenomenal. And the fact that they are so wanting to have students work with them and young professionals, and they're just more interested in making sure there's good science versus writing papers for their own good.
I've worked at 2 other mountaintop observatories, and so it was a real treat to go to Storm Peak Laboratory with Gannett. What I like to see were the aerosol instruments, how they had their inlet set up, and very specific things like that were interesting to me. I mean, the view is wonderful, but the scientist inside of me was excited to see, just the general setup and logistics and and how they deal with different weather issues and things like that.
Right up there is a aerosol particle sizer for the larger particle sizes. We're looking at things like dust storms, mainly. That's really what we see with that instrument. Underneath the two are two CPCs to measure aerosol concentration. And we've been doing that for a long time, so it's nice. We're starting to get kind of historical database built up. I've been here for 5 years. Before that was Randy Boris, who Lou Grant founded Storm Peak Lab, and Randy was his graduate student.
We've taken Storm Peak Lab to a new level, expanded its capabilities, expanded the facility, really built on something that was great, that was already existing, and taken it to what the previous director wanted in terms of expansion and new directions.
It was actually really hard, mostly because I joined a group that it was 4 men, and they've been working together for at least the last 10 years, and I was the first woman and first new member to permanently join their group. So it was just really hard. I was never treated the same. I'm a very independent individual, and I came in, and he knew I was very independent, but I was treated as the little girl in the group, and it got to the point where I actually ended up having to leave because I couldn't take it anymore. But I mean, none of the men were treated the same way I was being treated. It was overbearing. It was like I couldn't do anything on my own. For instance, if I went out with colleagues for a beer after dinner, I had phone calls at 11, where are you? We'll walk you back. And this is in San Francisco, which isn't dangerous, I think. But I mean, stuff like that. And that was AGU. I couldn't go out with colleagues to go drink without having my advisor tag along to make sure I was okay. And it'll be, when we went on field campaigns, I had to be supervised 24/7 unless I was in my room and going to bed.
It was a place where most of the people were older. So the youngest scientists there were in their 40s. And just about everybody was a man. So this is like from almost a different era that they were hired in on. So there wasn't a lot of women there, and the women who were there were secretaries. So to go in there, and this was an internship experience I had in undergrad, to go in there as a young woman, I was in my early 20s, and be one of the few women on that base, and it's very isolated. It was just really stressful to just not fit in, and people would say things. I was always called a girl, which normally I don't mind, but I did in that circumstance. So it's just, I didn't have a problem. I did work, and I was happy about that, but I just felt out of place, and I felt uncomfortable.
I've seen folks make comments when women teach that the reason that they get excellent recommendations is because the male students enjoy having them in front of the classroom instead of a 50-year-old man. And so that's very cutting. That's very cutting to someone's confidence, and it really undermines, their confidence and their career development.
It's especially hard for women who don't look really tough in the field, and I'll say that just because when I passed my orals, which is like one of the biggest exams towards your PhD, there were 2 guys who went around the department saying the only reason they let her pass was because they wanted a pretty face in the department. And that was in 2008. So, and these are my peers and my age. So it's still there. And I take it very personally because, if I had a choice between being pretty and brains, I would go for the brains. But I'm judged a lot by the way I look.
I can think of one other sort of blatant example where jokes are made that 2 people might be working at an outreach event or presenting a paper, and a male colleague will come up and say, "Hey, I know why they're talking to you. They're talking to you because you know why they're talking to you, right?" Inferring that the woman is getting more attention because of how she looks, when the real reason that folks are talking to her and sort of congregating around her is that she's more knowledgeable in that situation. She is the expert. And so those are the kinds of things that still happen in our field. And I know they don't just happen in atmospheric science, and it's sad that they happen, and it doesn't happen everywhere, but they do happen.
One of the exercises that we did when I began working in my elementary school is that you go into the school and the teacher just says, we have a guest coming. She doesn't say who you are, what you do, and so you stand in front of the class and they look at you and you look at them and you start giving them hints about who you are and what you do, and they begin to try to guess your career. And it was really interesting that in discussing this with some of my colleagues, for everybody, but specifically for the women, almost none of the classes guessed that they were a scientist. When you ask them to draw their depiction of a scientist, it's always generally male, generally an older man, wearing a lab coat with glasses. And that is what elementary school age children think of when they hear the word scientist.
It's not that girls are not interested in science, because they can be. It's more often that they're not encouraged to do science. The girl who is the star in the high school math class is not usually singled out as being the high achiever, and people make excuses for why she's doing well, and she's not necessarily encouraged to go on in science or math fields.
My own uncle said, I can't believe they would hire someone like her at NASA. And then he's followed it up because she doesn't look like the type.
I haven't been surprised to hear that other female scientists have had bad experiences, because a lot of the ladies that we're working with now, the young ladies, especially the ones in ASCENT, are entering the field with their PhDs, and they're entering the field ready to start a project, ready to lead a project, wanting to move forward quickly.
Well, one of the things is sort of the service drag. So when you're in an underrepresented field, they want to have a woman on every committee. And if you're the only one in the department, you're the woman on every committee. But you don't get credit for doing any of this work. You get credit for doing your research and teaching. And so you really have to learn how to graciously say no, so that you don't piss everybody off, but you're not just doing all this gut work in your department for no credit.
I've been trying to learn how to get past those little benign comments that are kind of sexist that you hear in field campaigns. And I've been trying to figure out ways to get past those or respond to those. And through previous workshops, I've learned that wit is a really good thing, and I keep trying wit, but I'm not witty. So it's not working for me. So I need to find a different way to address that. And I'm here to listen to what you guys have done in the past. So maybe you could help me with that.
You may have heard from other people that you talk to that one of the hardest things for women to do is to balance being aggressive enough without being too aggressive. And this is very common in science. And so women who are seen as too aggressive are labeled as bitchy and nasty and too masculine, and things that perhaps we don't want to have those labels. People who are not aggressive enough are ignored and stepped on, and it's not very uncommon to be in a meeting and, as a woman, present an idea that's completely ignored until it comes out of the mouth of a male colleague 15 minutes later, at which point it's brilliant. And so I think the trick is to figure out where along that spectrum someone is personally comfortable. And the absolute best thing that I heard at this workshop for me was the phrase to be persistently pleasant. So, and whatever that means to you individually, to not go so far that you feel you're being uncomfortably aggressive, but to not sit back and say nothing either, and to just persist in pleasantly asking for what it is you want.
I've discovered things like I cannot be aggressive the way I used to be. With either men or women. Men get very threatened or something. They don't like it. Women tend to withdraw. So I have had to learn, which it turns out feels much more naturally for me. I think the term I heard today was persistently pleasant. And it feels better anyway. It's like I had it for me, which I believe was completely a learned behavior, because inside, and this is borne out by some recent studies, brain studies of transgendered people, I'm inherently female. And that's really my natural mode of relating and being within the broad spectrum of what it means to be female or male. I think those Those gender differences, they're there, but nobody can ever quite pin them down. I think it's because the distributions of any given trait are so broad compared to, they overlap between male and female. It's pretty hard to say, well, that's a definite female thing, or that, because you can always find exceptions.
Susan Solomon was a role model. When I worked with her, she was a up-and-coming rising star scientist, and you could see that. But she was not yet famous for her work with the stratospheric ozone hole, and she was not, obviously had not touched the climate issues in working with the IPCC. It was, gosh, 25 years ago when I worked with her. But on the other hand, she was a role model in that I saw how she interacted with other scientists, and I saw how fairly aggressive and how she had to act more like a male to be respected and to be heard in her ideas. And that taught me something. And I noticed over the last 25 years that female scientists don't need to act like that anymore. I think I'm in this generation where it's sort of in between having to really be a little bit aggressive and being pleasant, being who we think we are naturally. And I think the younger generation is much more who they are naturally, that they don't have to put on a different persona in a male-dominated meeting.
Well, the way I get treated in meetings, I get talked over a lot more now. Men get more deference from other men and maybe from other women. It's much harder to make myself heard now. I absolutely say that. In fact, it used to make steam come out of my ears, and I finally got to the point where I just relax and wait for my opportunity, or wait for them to ask me. That is the difference I've definitely noticed.
Being a female in the workplace, I try very hard not to be emotional about things, which is very difficult because when you submit a paper or when you create a poster and you give it to your supervisor or a colleague and they completely rip it up, which happens a lot, it's part of science, it's what makes science improve. It's very difficult to not take it personally.
Women tend to think in a circle and men tend to think in a ladder. So women can be more inclusive. Men are more about establishing a hierarchy. That's kind of conventional wisdom. There's definitely some truth to that in my experience. That's one thing that attracted me to the atmospheric sciences was the inherent collaborative nature of it, which has made, there are these big projects where a lot of teams have to work together. And I think it's a more natural fit for a lot of women.
One of the senior scientists was just giving her talk, and she discussed how, so typical, she's the only woman in her group. And she talks about she has a much more collaborative and democratic style of decision making, and she works on large sort of engineering projects that involve lots of money and decisions need to be made, and she likes to get lots of input and talk through it with people and then come to a more democratic decision, but it takes a little bit longer, and she feels a lot of pressure from the men who are, let's make a decision, let's do it now, there's money on the line, let's go. And so she said sometimes she has to change her style a little bit, and she has to make decisions a little bit faster and kind of replicate that style of interaction.
Imaging studies of women and men solving similar problems, the activity in women's brains is much more distributed over the whole brain, whereas in men it's much more on the left side, very localized. So there are differences between men and women's thought patterns. There's differences in their brain. Better, worse, I don't think they're better, worse, but it's for sure that the women's way of thinking has not been honored, and the world is poorer for that, in my opinion.
I think there's a number of things that you can do. I mean, having women in leadership positions definitely sets a tone. And I think that is a good goal for science in general, just to have women in leadership positions. I think that would take care of a lot of it. I do think the younger generation, so colleagues of my generation, are doing much better. They're used to having us around. We're not new to them, and we're not any different than they are, and they realize that.
I do think that things are slowly changing, and the stories from some of the new and young women coming up are a little different from the stories of some of the senior scientists who have dealt with it in the 70s or 80s. I'll tell you a senior scientist story. And this is when women were sort of first joining the workforce. They were breaking into the ranks of law in some of these fields that have been dominated by men, like science. And a Hispanic woman who grew up in the Midwest during that time, who was the valedictorian of her high school class and who had excelled in her math and science classes, was told by her high school guidance counselor that she probably wasn't college material. So actively discouraged, not just from pursuing science, but pursuing education at all. And now I think things might be different because women are encouraged to pursue education and encouraged to go to college, but they're still not necessarily encouraged to go into science. And they don't really have a lot of role models in science to look to as examples of, well, there's a woman that I can look to and aspire to be like that.
The inherent feminine is a very, very strong force. I always liken it to it's the grass that will always grow through the cracks in the sidewalks and break them. And somehow, I believe it will happen, that women will be tapping into that, their true power, their true collective power, and it is going to change the world.
The women are more likely to have women as their mentors, so many of these women have at least one female graduate student or one female postdoc, and they can share the information that they learn here and the networks, most importantly, the people that they meet, they can further network those graduate students and postdocs.
One of the really important outcomes from this project has been the mentoring that's been received by the younger scientists. Many of them still are the only women in their department, or if they're not the only women in their department, they're the only woman in the research group. So there's still a lot of isolation, feelings of loneliness. It causes women to lose confidence or to doubt themselves. And so to have the senior scientists and the role models to look up to has been huge.
I'm looking for mentors. I'm in a critical stage of my career, starting to look for faculty positions. And this is a great opportunity to find a mentor that's within your field, but not directly responsible for your success. So you can be very honest and get sort of independent feedback on things.
In terms of mentoring, that's something that I've always struggled with. The people that I've worked with have been supportive, but haven't taken a very active role in my career. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here, because I'm still constantly looking for those mentoring relationships. And now I have graduate students of my own, and I think a lot about mentoring and how to mentor students.
The networking has been really great. And actually talking to Kathy Powell, which just getting an insight into the science director more and where I work, because I know there's a lot of underlying issues with women there. So, and being able to talk candidly with her has been actually really nice for me.
My mentors have been men because there have been very few women in my field, especially 20-some years ago. There are a few more now, but when I first started, there weren't very many women. I hope I have a lot to impart to the person that I mentor. I've been trying to think about ways that I will do it. I'm hoping they give us some suggestions with ASCENT. I think just email, touch base, how are things going? Have you had any problems, any difficulties? Is there something that I can do to help?
I actually became very close to my mentor, and she's helped me a lot. I've actually gone through this, since ASCENT, I've actually gone through a lot more stuff, and it's actually been really hard. I was recently part of this Young Experimenters campaign where I was the only female. And that was hard, but my mentor actually really helped me through it. So that's actually been the most important thing for me coming out of ASCENT.
Beth, or Dr. Holland, and I know each other for nearly 10 years because we were both at NCAR. However, in the last years, how busy life is, we kind of were not in touch so much. So then meeting again at ASCENT this last summer, we really bonded again. We were always good friends, but it's life. If you're not in everyday contact, sometimes you kind of drift apart. And also she was assigned to me as my mentor, ASCENT mentor. So there was at least several situations within the last 6 months that I really wanted her feedback in some professional developments, and also, we were always having conference over Skype. We talk over Skype, so you can have a video and you can chat, and you can also send files if you want to have a scientific discussion. So Skype is the best.
So I was assigned 2 proteges. One is Karen Snell at Oregon State University, and she comes to meetings at NCAR at least twice a year, and we always make sure that we spend a few hours together during those meetings, and that's a great way to stay in touch, and we email back and forth some in between. And the other was Katja Zepna, who's a postdoc at Mainz in Germany. And so she and I video conference on Skype regularly.
Professor Barbara Zielinski, she's also at DRI, and this summer in Steamboat Springs, she invited me to give a talk at Reno's DRI campus if I'm ever somewhere close. So then we were in contact just before AGU, because I told Barbara, if you still want me, I would love to come. And so I gave a talk there last week. And it was, I was really, really happy for this invitation, because that was my first ever invitation after I'm out of the PhD. And during the PhD, it's usually they invite you and your advisor, which is great, but this was the first time that somebody told me, I would like you to come and give us a little seminar.
My mentor in 2009 was Ann Thompson, who's at Penn State, and I visited Penn State to give a talk this past spring. Someone else actually invited me besides Ann, but I had some time to talk with her and update her then, and it was really nice because after I gave the talk in the department, she sent me a really nice follow-up email saying, what parts of my talk she liked and how she thought my career trajectory was going, and that was really nice feedback to get.
It's particularly great that Linnea went through pretty much the same experience as I had, because we went to the same, we had the same advisor in grad school, so she gets it immediately. I didn't even have to say much. I'm just happy to see at least female mentors. I grew up in Taiwan, so I came to the States when I was in college. Coming from an Asian country, I feel that women are less respected there. So coming to the States is an ascenting experience to me already.
It's been great because Sharon Zong, who was one of the senior scientists my year, she and I have run into each other a couple other times, and she's been a wonderful person just to know, and a senior woman in a field that's close to what I do, but not exactly. And she's been a great contact to know.
The fact that the senior women share their stories, and all of them have some sort of hardship or struggle, as we all do in our careers, whether it's balancing work and family, or whether it's been more active challenges in their career. And a lot of the younger women say that they see that these women have overcome those challenges and they've achieved great things, and I can do that too.
ASCENT has been great for providing a mentor, and so my mentor will be Marianne Carroll, and I'm excited to get to know her better, because one area that I don't have any expertise in, but I think is really growing and really interesting, is atmosphere-biosphere interactions, and that's a field where she's really a leader. So that's really exciting for me that she happened to be here at the same time I'm here, and we were able to be paired up.
My mentor is Liz Alexander, and we've stayed in touch through email and also Facebook. Really excited that Liz is my mentor. I've known her for quite some time, actually, but I've not seen her in probably 5 or 6 years. So it was great to reconnect with her, and I foresee a great mentor-mentee relationship in terms of just general issues, but also science. We've already been talking about collaborations.
I've been keeping up with on Facebook and email, and we're working on actually some collaboration down the road. So it's been good. That's been very good.
Liz has definitely supported me, and we keep talking about a potential collaboration. The only problem right now is I'm limited on time. I really want to borrow her instrument, but right now we're probably going to do a field campaign, and so I don't have time quite yet, but I can't wait to collaborate with her.
I think it's in a very exciting time for women in science. I think we've only begun to explore, women think about things differently, and I'm so excited to see what's going to happen as women come in and actually change the fundamental structure of scientific thought itself. I don't think we know what that's going to look like yet.
There is this whole idea of the pipeline, right? That you start somewhere in college in science and you work your way through, and whether you go into an academic career or into a research scientist career at a national lab or into industry, women in particular, are falling out of that track all the way along. And I don't think anybody has figured out how do you reach the people who have fallen out and get them entrained back in. And there's some studies that suggest it's almost impossible to get back in because time has gone by and things have changed, and it's really hard to jump back in. It's almost like getting on the highway. You think about merging on the highway in your car, and if you've got a long merge lane, it's not so hard to get up to speed and get back in. But if you've got a short one, it's really difficult. And I think for people coming back into the pipeline, the merge lane is really short.
As a junior scientist, it's certainly in the ether somehow that if you don't move up, you're going to have to move out. And that's, that has to happen on a very tight time scale. Why that needs to be, as an overall question, it's difficult to answer. I think difficult for anyone to answer. And one of the things I think people are grappling with, because that would certainly be a more family-friendly environment.
Women have made decisions to partner with someone where they're committed to this partner. And once they do that, they don't always intentionally pull themselves out of the job market, but they make a lot of series of decisions that takes them out of the job pool. So they do a lot of things that accommodate their partners. They change their career goals. They only apply to jobs near where their partner works. They wait for their partner to finish. They take sort of suboptimal temporary positions, to accommodate their partner's career. And once you start doing that in a competitive job market, you're basically out of the job market.
My now husband, at that time boyfriend, had, he applied for 2 postdocs and had 4 people call him and offer him one. But all of them were on the East Coast, where there's no real mountain hydrology at all. And so I went to my advisors and I said, so, do you know anybody, can I get a postdoc on the East Coast? And they said, why on earth would you want to go to the East Coast? Bad place. I said, because my boyfriend's there. And they said, we could find you a new boyfriend easier than we could find you a job on the East Coast.
My family is that's my backbone in my life. And so I would never, I don't ever compromise my time with them. And if anything, I feel like sometimes I have to sacrifice a bit on the job end, and that's the decision that I've made personally, because you can always find another job. It's a lot harder to find another family. It's possible too. People do it all the time, but that's something that I don't want to experience.
My husband is also in my field. He is also a faculty member in my department. So our science becomes very much intertwined in our professional and personal lives. We can talk about work at home. We both understand what each other is talking about.
It's working out well that we're both traveling at the same time, but traveling to different places. And when we started at Storm Peak Lab together, we were traveling a lot together because there wasn't any new startup project or business. There wasn't a lot of activity, and we were trying to generate business. And as projects and activities have grown around Storm Peak Lab and other tasks that we have, we've had a higher demand that requires us to not travel together as much.
I am in a relationship, a very new relationship, and I have definitely felt like I have lost relationships through my trajectory. And I don't know if it's just the trajectory or it's the relationships that you choose that can be somewhat amorphous to allow you to do multiple postdocs and do this and do that. But I have found that having a male partner follow you around the world can be emasculating for some men. Or it just is a difficult process for a man to go through. Or maybe I'm just, they're like, oh, or I could just blame myself and I'm a bad partner. I don't think that's the case, but when there is no settling except for the career, it's hard to sustain and build a strong relationship. Or that's my personal experience, and I don't know if that's just because of my inability to find that, but I feel like now I'm getting more settled in my career, like, okay, I got a tenure track job, and now we'll look around for a breeding partner or something. And it's okay. And it used to just be like, well, I'm doing this, and you could do that, and it'll be fun. And so I think that I'm at a place now where I can make different choices than I could have earlier.
I think I'm pretty satisfied right now, but I do like the fact that people talk about how they balance and how they manage a relationship, especially when you have a two-body problem where you have to find two jobs. And that's a huge issue, and that's something that I worry about in terms of if I meet someone who's another scientist or something, then how am I going to manage to get them in the same place that I am, or am I going to be willing to compromise and go where they are?
I have a teenage son here. My husband is currently in India. He was working in India. And then he's now looking for jobs here now. So it was initially like when I was married and had a kid, I took care of the family and supported my husband in his career. And then after my graduate school, I'm focusing on the career, and he's now taking care of us.
There's a postdoc in our car who is in the process of negotiating a job offer, and her husband still lives in India. And I said, there's a spousal accommodation at a lot of institutions. These are opportunities, and you should negotiate that, be aware of that. And I think those kinds of things is what I've learned through ASCENT and through talking with the senior scientists, especially through their experiences. Both opportunities missed and opportunities they've taken advantage of.
I think one of the best things that happens at this conference is people learn about different institutional policies. So University X has a stop the clock policy, which forces universities to allow for an extra year for women or men who have children during their tenure process. Maybe the person from University Y didn't realize that could be an option for their university. So really trying to get out best practices in policies that help retain women in science, I think is one of the most important things ASCENT does.
I think that issues like maternity leave are starting to become better addressed at a lot of institutions, especially because of initiatives like the NSF Advanced program, which gave money to institutions to transform some of their policies to make them more friendly to women scientists. So I think it's slowly getting better. There need to be options for part-time work. Not everybody wants to work full-time when they have young children at home. Men need to be encouraged to take advantage of these policies too. They need to be seen as family concerns, not just women's concerns. But anybody who has a family, whether it be young kids at home or elderly parents that you're taking care of. These are work-life issues, and men actually have those issues too. But there can be some stigma to men taking advantage of these policies. Just to share a story from my own life, my husband is in a scientific institution, and he was the first man at his college to take paternity leave. And one of the board of directors actually said to him in person, any man who would take paternity leave doesn't have his priorities straight. So it was okay at that institution for a woman to take maternity leave and to stop the clock and get a semester off. But it was not okay for him because he was a man. So I think until these things become more equitable and you see men and women taking advantage of them and they're just seen as life issues, it'll become less of a problem for women and it'll become a much more flexible and friendly workplace.
And I think a lot of the struggles I have with work-life balance are internal struggles, and they're struggles with identity. And being at a conference like this actually, in some sense, enhances that struggle, because as far as I can see, there's no one else here with kids who's working half-time, who's made that choice. And so there's a part of me on the inside which says, you know, I was a very ambitious person until I had kids, and now my ambition has changed in some way that I haven't quite got a handle on yet. because my priorities have changed really dramatically. And but that, that's such an internal struggle. I don't want to at any way suggest that that's an external obstacle. It may turn out that it is an external obstacle with this thing about not being able to slow down the timeline, but maybe it won't. I don't know in the end how that will be. And I would say one thing that this conference has done, not to make me, it's not really buoying, but it's a good reminder that I've heard from a lot of the women, which is like these choices about priorities are really personal choices.
That self-evaluative measure is a difficult one to come by because you're always judging yourself against other people. So it's hard sometimes for me. So might say one of my roadblocks is that I have trouble being objective enough about my own career. And I find that it's too easy to compare yourself to someone else or how someone looks on paper. And how someone looks on paper and how they are in real life are two very different things.
I'm horrible. I have no balance. I am not married. I don't have kids. I actually don't see myself having kids. That's not something that is really important in the way I view myself, which is interesting because my friends from college say that I was exactly the opposite in college, that I really wanted kids. But so what I do on the side instead is I run. And so that's the time sink that everyone else, spends time with their kids or spends time with their husband. I spend time running.
I know they talk about it doesn't matter if you have a child or if you just want your own personal time, it's all about balance. But I do feel like I have time to do more work and almost should be doing more because I don't have children or anything yet. But I try and set aside different times to do things during the day, to work and then to, be with my husband and try and, do two things at once. We do active things together and then work again later at night. But it doesn't always work out that way. And I think it's something that I'll constantly be working at.
I have a life, and I just say, you know what, I shut it off and I go home. And if that means that I'm not going to be a top researcher, then that's fine. Like when I was in graduate school, I spent 2 years just being in graduate school and just doing that thing, and I was starting to go crazy, so I had to do some comedy, and that helped me stay sane. For whatever reason, going on stage and acting like an idiot made me feel just a lot better about the other professional stuff that I had to do all the time. So like both sides of my brain were working.
I have a 2.5-year-old son. I had him when I was in grad school because grad school wasn't going very well, and I felt like I needed something to enlighten me, and life did. So it was a very life-changing experience, and it definitely helped putting things into perspective. So I think I actually strike a better balance now in that I know that as much as I like doing research and enjoy my work and thinking alone, I prioritize my son's needs and family when he's still little. When he's older, I'm sure I'll, feel like, I can feel more free to do whatever I want in the research field. But so it definitely helps prioritizing easier.
I feel like I'm also running out of time because I'm 30. So that kind of stuff worries me, that I got to check all these things off my list. And that's the one thing, having kids, I haven't checked off my list yet. But I mean, even if I think of the next 2 years, what I have to accomplish and what I have to do to prove myself at work and move ahead and keep up with the guys, I can't do all of it.
I want to have kids. And it was great to see the senior scientists at ASCENT talk about when they had their kids and how many children they had, and just to know that, without knowing all the specifics, they had children. That was successful, and if they can do it, then I can do it. And it is something. I'm 30, so I want to have kids soon. It's definitely on my mind, and so that was a great part of ASCENT.
I had my twin sons, and people were amazed at how I could balance my work life and my family life. And a lot of times my response was, you just do what you had to do. And again, I didn't think it was that great of a insight to give people. But on the other hand, as more people asked along, as the years went by, I put more thought into it and realized I did have some tidbits of information to give to people.
I have a daughter, and it has a stepdaughter. Her name is Ocean, and she lives with us about 3 months out of the year. She comes for summertime, Christmas vacation, spring break, or Thanksgiving. Always in the summertime, and so we are able to take some time off at the holidays when she comes around, and we also manage our schedule so that we spend time with her in the summer as well.
I think Gannett is awesome. What I like best about Steamboat Springs is that the snow is really good, so you can ski really well, and they have a really, really nice pool, and they have really nice biking trails.
I am pregnant, and so what is great about the fellowship that I'm on now is I get a true maternity leave, so I can take 8 weeks, 11 weeks, whatever it is, and that's added on to the end of the fellowship. So it is instead of losing that time. So that is a really good thing about the timing right now is that I don't lose time in my postdoc for maternity leave.
So I got engaged in the spring of this year, and I'm getting married next summer to a great guy. And so I have a lot more depth in my life now than formerly when I basically worked all the time.
Couple changes. I had twins in February, earlier this year in 2010, and Levi and Cody, they're fantastic. And another thing that's come up in the last year was that I was elected the Faculty Senate Chair at DRI. My first week back from maternity leave, I was fortunate in that I was able to negotiate and work with our Human Resources Office to maximize my maternity leave. And again, that's a skill or knowledge that I think I probably got out of ASCENT. These other people offered me an opportunity I can't say no to. And that's what it came down to for multiple reasons. You know, it wasn't salary, really, but it was opportunity to be in a new position that they've never had before, a new challenge, and to work in a different geographic area, particularly one that's closer to our family, and we had the option. So that was another reason to move back. Or move away from DRI. And also that part of the offer that they gave us was to hire my husband with me. It wasn't a single factor that they had me on. You know, it wasn't a single draw, but a group of things that came together all at the same time that presented an opportunity. We just couldn't say no. That doesn't happen very often.
The structure of science is set up that it takes a very long time to get trained to the point where you're doing PhD level science. You have to go through a graduate program for 6 years or even 7 years. Then you go into a postdoc for a few years. And if you want to become an academic, then you get a tenure track position. And it's about another 7 years before you get tenure. And by then, a woman is almost 40. And the biological clock is ticking. Either that or she's had children during the whole experience, which slows her down a little bit and makes some women question their priorities of being in the lab for 50 or 60 hours a week that it takes to do high-level science.
I think that as you go further in your career, you may realize that it's difficult to be a scientist and a mother or a scientist and a wife. And I think having fellow women colleagues and women mentors helps you understand how to make that possible.
I think it's hard to compare all 3 years in detail, right? They're very intense workshops, right? 2.5 days, long days. I think all 3 were really successful. I think we met a lot of our goals in helping women establish relationships with their peers and with mentors. But every year was a little bit different, I think because of the personalities of the people who were here. I don't think I could say any year was any better than any other, although the weather was certainly better in 2010 and 11. But I think, you know, all 3 years were great.
Absolutely. ASCENT has definitely met my expectations, especially for mentoring and networking. And that's where ASCENT, I think, really excels. This, I would say, is an unparalleled networking event for women. You have so many opportunities to interact, and you have opportunities to interact not just in a professional way, so the poster sessions where you're really talking about science, but at dinner you can sort of go back and forth between professional and science interests and then to more personal things. So that's been really great.
We have, through a formal evaluation process, we have evidence that it's working. people are staying in touch and people are forming research collaborations. And if you put 30 very, very smart women in the same room who are all interested in similar stuff, I think that amazing science happens.
We're very fortunate to have our evaluator, Heather, who's right there, who actually has documented this, that ASCENT has been successful for the last 2 years and has helped women gain research collaboration and thus publish more papers.
I've been working on the evaluation of the ASCENT program for 3 years now, and overall, the conferences have really increased the networking among the women. All of the women feel that they've enhanced their networks, that they have professional collaborations. They feel like they have women that they can connect with at conferences, and they don't feel so lonely in the field anymore. And they carry it with them in their institutions and their research groups, even after they're not here anymore. And so when they hit obstacles or they face hard times in their career, they think about ASCENT and the support that they had here and the network that they have, and it helps to get them through.
I'm really happy with our results from our evaluation. I think our evaluation definitely shows that ASCENT, A, was needed. It was oversubscribed every year. People were attending it to build a professional network, and that was the goal of the program. And then people are staying in contact, which is extremely important, are enhancing their network, which is extremely important, and they also feel less isolated and thus more likely to stay in academia and to stay in science. And I think that that's the real hallmark of ASCENT. This is all, very touchy-feely, and we all feel good about what we're doing because we're bringing women together. But if we have hard data showing that this program works, and that not only are we bringing people together, but we're enhancing their professional networking, and thus we're enhancing their chances of being successful and doing better science.
My greatest takeaway was definitely meeting and networking with all these other great women that are, leading in their fields, and just actually meeting with them one-on-one. And so that now, I guess in general, I'm kind of a shy person. So having had a meeting like this has now enabled me to feel comfortable to just either randomly send them an email or randomly talk to them at a conference, which I would have never done otherwise.
Instead of trying to change the women by giving them new skills or making them more competitive, the idea is to change the institutions so that women are more successful. But along the way, by changing the institutions so women are more successful, you make everybody more successful.
I want to make sure that in making this movie, what comes across is that women like me, we love our jobs, we love science, we're not leaving science. I'm passionate about clean air. That's why I do my job. I absolutely love it, and I hope I can do it for the rest of my life.
I still consider it the best conference/workshop I ever attended, because Gannett and Ian and everybody else treated us just superbly, and I learned a lot scientifically. I feel like I deepened my connections to people I knew before, and I developed new friendships. And yeah, it was one of the most enjoyable 3 days spent in a scientific meeting or a workshop by far. Yeah.
ASCENT was a success, and we had nearly 90 women participate. We've had a great showing here today. We've had a great showing at all our reunion events. We also have had great workshops and excellent keynote speakers, so I think it's gone really well. Way beyond my expectations.
This is sort of bittersweet for us because our grant funding runs out this year, so officially this is the last ASCENT workshop of 3. But I think we are hearing from people that this workshop has been so valuable to them that we would really like to see it continue. I don't know that we would be able to get enough funding together to host a workshop in 2012, but I think we are all optimistic that we can pull funding together for a workshop in 2013 and hopefully find a more sustainable mechanism. We can't rely on the National Science Foundation to give us grant money year after year for this. But I think we can show that there's been such value from this project, from this series of workshops, that I hope we could get money from agencies, all the federal agencies, from NASA, from the Department of Energy, from EPA, and maybe from some private companies as well that work with atmospheric scientists to support this over time.
I think what we've all gotten out of ASCENT is something for everyone, and there are components for each participant of ASCENT that they can walk away with based on their personal or professional experience and where they are now.
We all love what we do, or we wouldn't do it. I mean, pay isn't that great. You work all the time. You might gotta love it. So when you meet other people who also love it, it's kind of like this spiritual thing almost. You're just connected.
Well, I think our goal is to provide women with mentors, with colleagues, with collaborators, and we realize that this is really just the first step. So this is an opportunity for them to meet people that they might be able to work with or talk to during the course of their careers for advice. But, you know, it's the first step.